If I told you Mega Venusaur EX was a great Pokemon TCG deck, I would be making a mistake. We're all human, and we all make mistakes. But how about the largest media franchise ever making the same mistakes over and over again for over a decade? How about 2 decades? Well, it turns out Pokemon's been making mistakes right in front of our noses almost every 3 months, and it's time that someone calls them out. So today, I'm here to point out repeated mistakes in Pokemon cards and explain why these mistakes keep happening. Be sure to subscribe if you enjoy. I don't know, let's just start. So, mistakes. They come in many forms in life. From what you say, to what you think, to blaming luck in the Pokemon trading card game. But Pokemon's mistakes are a bit more subtle, and for the most part, they're actually pretty hard to spot for most players. This is because most Pokemon TCG players and collectors haven't actually played enough of the Pokemon video games to know certain information, and it's this information that's usually at the root of these mistakes. First, let's talk about by far the most common Pokemon card mistake: incorrect weaknesses. Now, if you know about type advantage from the TCG alone and never played or seen anything of the video games, it might surprise you that not all fire type Pokemon are actually weak to water. Just as not all water type Pokemon are weak to grass, just as all grass type Pokemon aren't weak to fire, etc. This is because Pokemon often have dual typings, and these typings each provide their own unique set of weaknesses, neutralities, resistances, and immunities. For example, let's take Primal Groudon, who is a fire and ground type Pokemon. No particular reason, just, out of the top of my head. Fire is weak to water, ground, and rock, and resists fairy, bug, grass, steel, ice, and fire type moves, while ground is weak to ice, grass, and water, and resists rock and poison while being immune to electric. As we can see by this small type chart here, Primal Groudon's typings actually cancel out quite a few would-be weaknesses. Ground is weak to ice and grass, but since fire resists grass and ice, the relationships are now neutral. Fire is normally weak to rock, but ground resists rock, making that neutral as well. What we're left with is a 4 times weakness to water, 2 times weakness to ground, resistances to fairy, bug, fire, poison, and steel, immunity to electric, and neutral to everything else. So Primal Groudon objectively is only weak to water and ground type moves. That's it. So why then does the Primal Groudon EX Pokemon card have a weakness to grass? It's not weak to grass or bug, yet it has a grass weakness on the card. Why does Mega Audino have a fighting weakness when its fairy typing cancels that weakness out? Mega Audino is only weak to poison and steel, and it's just not there. It has no poison or steel weakness. There are countless examples, including Marnie's Grimmsnarl EX being weak to grass when it isn't weak to grass or bug thanks to its fairy typing, Wellspring Mask, Cornerstone Mask, and Hearthflame Mask Ogerpon EX being weak to electric, grass, and water respectively when their grass typing cancels that out, etc. Pokemon keeps doing this over and over again and has been for years, but there is actually a good explanation for it. To put it simply, making every weakness 100% accurate for every Pokemon card isn't great for game balance most of the time. The Pokemon TCG only has 8 basic energy types supported in standard right now, rip the fairy type, and each type can hit something else for weakness. So imagine a world where a dark type Pokemon like Grimmsnarl wasn't weak to the traditional bug, aka grass in the TCG, but instead an actual weakness it has like poison or steel. It would make no sense for a dark type Pokemon like Grimmsnarl to be weak to another dark type attack or a steel type attack when most dark type Pokemon in the games aren't actually weak to either of those types. Basically, to simplify the design of the TCG, Creatures Inc. decided that the best way to balance the game consistently would be to accept making a few mistakes here and there when giving weaknesses to Pokemon. It actually does make some sense when you consider that not everything in the TCG has to be one-to-one with the video games. I mean, just look at the Holon region or Eternamax Eternatus. These things weren't usable in the video games for players, and yet they made their way into the card game because shaking things up once in a while is pretty fun sometimes. Emphasis on sometimes though, because, maybe we shouldn't bring back VMAX or tag team cards. Please. I'm begging you. Moving on to the next batch of mistakes, we have mistranslations. Obviously, Pokemon cards are originally created in Japan, and then they get translated to other languages when they're releasing in every region. However, sometimes things can slip through the cracks when going language to language for hundreds upon thousands of cards year after year. However, these mistakes are actually the most impactful to competitive players of the Pokemon TCG. First, and certainly not the least, is Slowking from Neo Genesis with the Mind Games ability. Mind Games in Japanese states that as long as Slowking is in the active spot, whenever the opponent uses a trainer card, you flip a coin. and if heads, you put that trainer card on top of your opponent's deck while failing the use of it. However, in English, Wizards of the Coast fatally forgot to add the part that Slowking had to be in the active spot to use the ability. This means that if you had 4 Slowking in play, regardless of being in the active or on the bench, you had 4 coin flips in total to prevent your opponent from playing a trainer card each time. This was essentially a complete trainer lock, as 4 tails in a row is a 1 out of 16 chance that the trainer gets used. This was so broken that it not only won Worlds in 2002, the Wizards of the Coast somewhat unofficial Worlds, but was also banned from the next standard format. This mistranslation was without a doubt one of the biggest mistakes Pokemon has ever made in the history of the trading card game. This next mistranslated card was actually given in errata right before the 2016 Pokemon World Championships, and if it hadn't, it might have done even better at this event. This Galvantula card from Steam Siege is a dual-typed grass and lightning type Pokemon with 2 decent attacks. Electro Web costs 1 lightning and does 30 damage and retreat locks the opponent. This means that it could potentially buy you time or win the game on occasion if the opponent was low on resources and got their Hoopa EX or Vileplume stuck in the active spot, for example. Its first attack, Double Thread, costs 1 colorless energy and does 30 damage to 2 of your opponent's Pokemon while applying weakness and resistance to bench Pokemon. This is one of the first, if not possibly the first time, weakness and resistance would ever be applied to benched Pokemon on an attack. This card was actually pretty good in Rainbow Road decks built around Xerneas. Xerneas from Breakthrough's first attack, Rainbow Force, does 10 damage plus 30 more damage for each different type of Pokemon on your bench. With the Skyfield Stadium expanding both players' bench size to 8, dual-typed Pokemon like Galvantula and Volcanion EX could add 60 extra damage each for 1 bench space. This deck was kind of rogue at times, but it did win a regional and also won NAIC in the Juniors division in 2017. However, Galvantula was also occasionally used in Night March as a one-of tech card. Joltik from Phantom Forces was the main attacker of the deck and had just 30 HP. So in the Night March mirror match, Galvantula could evolve from one of your Joltiks, and then with one use of Startling Megaphone to remove all Fighting Fury Belts, it could be used to KO 2 of the opponent's Joltiks at once. This could massively swing the outcome of the game, since the Night March mirror match was all about prize racing and preserving double colorless energies. It could also hit 2 Shaman EX both for weakness and threaten a 4 prize turn on them next turn with another use of Double Threat. However, this attack was actually mistranslated to be way better than originally intended. The original text of Double Threat stated that it could only target benched Pokemon, while the Steam Siege English version said it could target the active spot as well. This mattered a lot because in the matchup versus Night March, they're probably going to have a Joltik in the active spot attacking you, so not being able to double threat it could be the difference between winning and losing the game. So Pokemon issued an errata to Galvantula for the World Championships in 2016, which made it way worse as a Night March mirror tech. The errata simply reverted it to only being able to target benched Pokemon, meaning that it couldn't KO anything in the active spot like a Joltik or a Shaman, for example. However, Kianamini still placed 17th at the World Championships with this Galvantula in his Night March deck for the mirror match, proving that it still could be productive even after the nerf. This card obviously was used in Rainbow Road after rotation, but it definitely could have been much stronger if an errata never happened. I guess they learned something from the Wizards of the Coast days, although this card obviously wasn't nearly as impactful as Slowking was. So these mistakes, mistranslations, are actually the easiest to call human errors. There's no reason to intentionally mistranslate a card for a deeper reason most of the time. There are some theories that Wizards of the Coast intentionally mistranslated Slowking to ruin the Pokemon TCG in order to better Magic, but whether you believe in that or not, these sorts of mistakes are just human errors that usually slip through the cracks. Anyways, that's the video. This is just a bit of a shorter video I wanted to make talking about some common mistakes in the TCG. And obviously I didn't cover every card for every example, but you know, I can't really do that in this video. So if you have any examples that I didn't mention in the video, be sure to comment those down below. I'd love to see it. Anyways, take care, have a good one, bye.